This is Connecting Your Community.
Connecting your community.
Building community through unity. Blaine Huygen and Mallory Christensen are on a mission, podcasting from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. Getting things done takes activism, and Blaine and Mallory have taken it upon themselves to get things done. Watching how other communities handle like problems and sharing successes from them. Connecting your community. Here are your hosts, Blaine Huygen and Mallory Christensen.
Well, it is actually just Mallory Christensen today, and I'm joined with a very amazing human being, Mike Hoffman. Mike, welcome to Connecting Your Community and being on our first podcast as our first official guest here. We had Taryn last week, but today we welcome you. So, hi, Mike.
Hi, Mallory.
How are you doing?
Well, better.
Yeah. That's good.
So
that's good.
I'm back and back to normal almost.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. So, Mike, we are going to be talking about some controversial matters today. I've followed a lot of the work that you have put out on social media. I've spoke to you in person about a lot of the different experiences that you have, and really ultimately here to remind all of our followers as well that we are here to hear every different perspective on every different issue, and that yours is one of many. But what compelled me the most to bring you on was definitely your first responder experience, because you have years of it. So, Mike, can you share a little bit about who you are and your frontline experience and your credentials?
Yeah, certainly. Well, first and foremost, thanks for inviting me to come on. And it is a pleasure to be here and to have a voice, because I do believe that's important. As you know, we've talked many times about some of the freedoms that I believe very strongly in, and one of them is the freedom of speech, and that's what we're doing here. We're exercising
Absolutely.
that. So my background is I spent 27 years in emergency services, particularly on the front lines as a firefighter and a paramedic in the province of Alberta and elsewhere. I traveled around a little bit in my career. Had a great career in the field of emergency services and emergency medicine. And that was really what compelled me to step forward after my retirement, was to utilize those experiences that I had, as all of us do as we step forward in life.
Absolutely.
And we look back at the lessons that we've learned and we try and apply them as we go forward. And certainly as human beings, we all make mistakes. And those are some of the best learning experiences we have.
Yep.
Certainly, I was a fallible human being and I made my fair share throughout my career, but I learned some great valuable lessons. And unfortunately, one of the things that I was forced to deal with as a frontline paramedic for 21 years was addictions. And so when this situation came to light, I really felt passionate about wanting to step forward and help. How can I relay my experiences to this circumstance, and how can I help it?
So what kind of credentials do you have behind you, just so that we can let listeners know?
Sure. So started off life as a paramedic. So I went to SAIT in Calgary, and I've got a 2-year diploma in paramedicine. So I operated as what they call an advanced care paramedic level today, by today's standards. And also I was a firefighter, so I'm 1001, 1002, 1003. Those are all NFPA certifications for all of you out there in non-NFPA land. And we gather those certifications over our career, and at the end of it, we have a long pile of various certifications that we have. But the main ones that I possess are I'm level 4 fire chief qualified, which is the highest level you can attain, and that's where I finished off my career. I was a fire chief at the very end of my tenure, so I'd worked my way up through the ranks from just being a lowly firefighter paramedic out on the streets slocking it out with the rest of them, all the way till I made lieutenant status and captain, and then worked my way.
That's amazing. And just on behalf of everyone that's watching, I'm sure, and even as a daughter of a first responder, retired platoon chief, I want to say thank you. thank you for your service and for everything that you have seen over the years. And thank you for being willing to be with us today. I will mention that's probably the ugliest. I thought I had the ugliest. I'm not a Flames fan at all, but that has to be the ugliest sweater that I've seen. If you were coming to the ugly sweater party, you'd probably win with that Oilers stuff on. Whoa. Anyway, so Mike, what really prompted me to have some conversation with you was you share very openly about Band-Aid solutions. Okay. Now you share about City of Lethbridge Band-Aid solutions and what has been implemented, maybe even specifically over the last couple years here in Lethbridge. So I'm wondering if you can just briefly sum up some of the Band-Aid solutions that you very radically refer to.
Well, I think first and foremost, and I've been very vocal about this, you know, our local Arches harm reduction site, or what they refer to as a supervised consumption site. You know, I think that is the first Band-Aid solution that we've put to this global problem that we're experiencing with this opioid crisis. And what I mean by that is I think their intentions were good at the beginning, but, you know, without all of the pillars that we've heard about and we've talked about, and that we lovingly know, those 4 pillars, they're only doing one of the 4. And unfortunately, it is the last pillar that we should be addressing, and that is, if we can't get them into intox, detox, if we can't get them mental health, which is really the grassroots issue of what's going on with most of these things, if we can't get them those things, then the last thing we should be doing is supporting their habit to bridge the gap, to get them to those services. But unfortunately, what we did is we put, you know, the proverbial, you know, cart before the horse, and all we've been doing is feeding the animal, which is addiction. And I know Arches people don't like that term, you know, addict, but, you know, let's not candy coat this. Let's tell it like it is. Let's not sweep the problem under the carpet. We're dealing with people that are addicted to substances. And unfortunately, it's not the same types of addictions that I dealt with when I was a street paramedic.
I bet.
I mean, we had heroin and we had, you know, all the standard things that were going on out there in the day. But fentanyl was something that I administered as a healthcare practitioner to patients, and it was a helpful thing, as is all opioids.
Absolutely.
All opioids have a place in medicine.
Yes, they do.
And unfortunately, some bad people in the world have discovered that this is the next best way to make money. It's profitable. And now it's an abused substance.
So some other Band-Aids, right? And, you know, I will just also make mention that I may not agree with you on some of these things, but what I do want to say is that this is how conversation needs to happen, right? And,
Absolutely.
you know, so thank you. And despite even some of our differences on approaches and perspectives, we're able to come together and talk about these things, right?
Absolutely.
So just a couple more Band-Aid solutions that you have, you know, voiced.
Well, the Watch program is another one. You know,
And for people who are watching right now, we have a lot of followers that are outside of Lethbridge. So just briefly, what is the Watch?
Well, the Watch program was a volunteer policing program that was implemented by the Lethbridge City Police, and it was designed to be, you know, eyes on the subject matter, ears to the ground, you know, a way to report
So,
crime.
and also they do not carry any type of firearm or anything like that.
No.
They cannot arrest people, right? Just so people kind of know a little bit about the Watch. And then a couple more other programs that you've talked about that you feel have been Band-Aid solutions in the community of Lethbridge.
Yeah, and the next one up for me has always been the DOT program. You know, it's a
Downtown outreach team?
Yeah, so it's a program that was designed to kind of defer the problem. You know, the best way I've described it to people that ask me about, well, why are you taking issue with these guys? Well, it's like the old shell game. Do you remember those
No,
people
Mike,
that-
I don't remember
that
the
sit
shell
on-
game.
Sit on the corner in Las
Let's be
Vegas
real.
and
No,
they
I
put a
played with
key
like
under
Little
a shell.
Pony and stuff like that.
Well, it's a little magic trick. It's 3 shells, and the person puts a pea under the shell and then mixes the shells up and then asks you to select which one has the
So
pea.
you've talked about some of these Band-Aid solutions that have been implemented by the City of Lethbridge, and much. So I guess my next question for you, and in your opinion, we had the statistics released on the dramatic increase of first responder calls, right? So we're talking police, we're talking EMS, Lethbridge Fire Department. Now, in your opinion, what does this tell the residents? So we have what you have referred to as Band-Aid solutions. Then we have a dramatic increase in crime statistics that have been released. What does this tell the residents of Lethbridge and the followers that are watching this podcast right now?
Yeah, and you can't ignore this. Some of the groups like to make light of some of the statistics, and they, again, back to the shell game and misdirection. They try and tell you that, those numbers aren't accurate, but they are accurate
because there are statistics that are collected, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this is why you invited me here, and that is I'm going to give you the frontline workers' perspective.
That's amazing, and I think we need that. We don't talk about it because so often we have that red tape around our mouth, right?
Right.
You know, if I was to come forward and share the things that I have saw, which I mean, in some cases I have, I've been harassed. I've gone through extreme controversy, technically blacklisted, as a result of standing up. And this is for all 4 pillars that you talked about: supportive housing, in-talks, supervised consumption. I want to see all 4, right? So with those statistics, Mike, what does that share? What does that tell us?
Well, and I'm in contact with frontline workers because I've either worked with them in my past or I taught them.
Absolutely.
And so right from the horse's mouth, they're telling me they're run off their feet.
Absolutely.
They're frustrated.
Yep.
They have call volumes that they simply just can't deal with, that they're pulled away from their regular duties, helping citizens that really need their help, and they get pulled away from those circumstances. And as a first responder, that is highly frustrating.
I couldn't even imagine.
It's highly frustrating knowing that you're needed somewhere else for something legitimate, and you're being pulled away constantly to deal with a problem that you know that you could deal with in a lot different manner. And I think that's the main thing that we're missing here. And it's because a lot of our frontline workers, they don't want to lose their jobs.
I know.
They don't want to
terrible,
suffer harassment.
Yeah.
Right? So what they do is they suppress what they want to say. Because I'm going to be real open and honest with you, and I actually asked the former fire chief here because he was at the public meetings when that was going down.
Which public meetings are you referring to, Mike?
That was the newly appointed panel that came to Lethbridge that was here to listen to citizen complaints about the impacts of the safe consumption site. And so when we were at those meetings, I engaged with a lot of people that obviously I knew from my past.
And both perspectives though, right?
Yeah.
Like you talked to both people, both for it and both against it.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
You
Just
bet.
want to make sure.
Yeah, I had lots of good conversations because, I think you've made a valuable point here. Even though we've agreed to disagree on some points, and obviously we've disagreed.
Quite a bit, let's be real. I'm actually a Penguins fan, like by heart.
Yeah.
Like just that's my team. So I was like, ugliest sweater ever is
that's
Calgary
why I'm
Flames.
so shocked that
But I don't
you're
know
wearing such a rag.
I know.
But
anyway, we can disagree, but we can also agree to disagree. Right?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of freedom of speech is that, you're entitled to your opinion and you can freely offer it.
So going back to these statistics, what does that share and tell the community with over, what was it? What was the percentage of increase in first responder statistics and calls?
Well, that one's eluding me right now, but I can tell you, and I'll tell you why it's eluding me. It's because when I went to look up those stats today, they were conveniently not there anymore.
Okay.
So, back to the shell game that I talked about, there's a lot of misdirection that's been going on. And part of that is hiding and being not as transparent as they should be. I mean, these are public services and they need to be in full disclosure. Yeah, we're paying for those. So that means that I should have full access to all that information. And I just find it interesting it's not there. But I can tell you this, 3,200 calls down to the safe consumption site. And I know we got to take a break, so maybe I'll get back to that.
Okay, that sounds good. So we're going to have a quick break and we'll come back and talk about those statistics.
This is Connecting Your Community with Blaine and Mallory. We'll be right back after these messages.
The best thing around
Is Copy Express your one-stop print shop?
best thing around.
Is the service at Copy Express?
The best thing around. That's what you found. The best thing around.
Blaine Higgin and the team at Copy Express offer the best of the best 2019 copy service. Perfect for your holiday gifting. Get your personalized Christmas calendars printed now and get 50% off your order of 2 or more. Copy Express, locally owned and operated just north of Costco.
There's a new art shop in town.
What?
Watercolors, acrylics, pastels, brushes, oils, canvas, and paper.
Oh, where?
It's new, the art room at Smith's Audio on 13th Street North.
For high performance sound.
And super art supplies.
Yeah, I don't like either of these sweaters right now. But in any event, so we're back. And thank you to Smith's Audio and thank you to Copy Express for being so wonderful and sponsoring this amazing podcast. And, you know, we've already had so many other people come forward to sponsor, and that's just what community is all about. So back to these statistics, very briefly, sum it up. What does that tell residents?
Well, I was alluding to just before the break, 3,200 EMS responses just to the immediate area for opioid related incidents. Mm-hmm. That was a stat that was released a while back. Now, when you add that up, that's $385 per ambulance trip.
Wow.
Do the math, folks. That's $1.2 million. That's
a lot of money.
Out of your and my pocket. Mm-hmm. So, what does the statistical values, numbers, we all know about stats, you can, manipulate them, but let's face facts. Crime rates have gone up in Lethbridge. That is a fact.
Thousands and thousands.
Absolutely.
Percent
and
statistic
all you gotta
increase
do is
of
go on
crime.
social media.
Yep.
And you're going to see the person who's had their truck broken into, all that stuff. So what does it mean to us? It just means that we're draining the public coffers, and it's creating not just a financial impact on this community, but it's taken its toll in this community as far as it's really torn at the fiber, right?
So that makes me wonder and want to ask you is, do you feel that there's been more harm done in our community overall with the general population, with children, with seniors, other people who aren't accessing these services that you've brought up? Is there more harm done to our community?
Well, I can just sum it up by saying that, the supervised consumption site is not even following that basic mandate because nobody's being supervised. Well, some people are, the ones that happen to go in there, but that's only a very small percentage of the users. Most of them go in, get their syringes, and they decide to leave. And they say that's okay. Arches, that is. And it's not, because those are some of the greatest impacts that we've been feeling in our community.
Especially individuals shooting up, using illegal drugs within the community in public settings. We know children have been pricked by dirty uncapped needles, right? You've also spoke to that a little bit, but so we've talked about frontline experience for yourself. We've talked about the Band-Aid solutions, which you have voiced and in your opinion are the Band-Aid solutions. We've talked about some statistics that have been released. And so for me, I guess I want to ask you, especially as a first responder and someone who's retired and was in the field for so long, we had Connecting Our Community made a motion, asked for more police officers, specifically the burnout increase, right? We had, X amount of officers that it was public knowledge, even EMS that are now on stress leave. And, we wanted to really do something about this because officers are tirelessly working around the clock. Even on the north side, Mike, through the summer, there was 16 hours, 24 hours wait time for an officer to come. And it's not as a result of negligence. It's a result of, hundreds of other files and open cases that they're dealing with, right? So in any event, the acting chief currently, he implemented a new initiative called the Crime Suppression Team. And so for me, of course, I do my research and I find out, I'm like, this isn't really any different from the downtown police unit and, who has just been instrumental in everything downtown. Right. They're amazing officers. So I guess in your opinion, because there was no mention of decreasing burnout by this new team, there was no mention of, anything as far as, just even reducing overtime, because we know these guys, police and EMS, are working overtime galore. So my question is this new unit even going to make a difference as far as mental health, moral burnout, all of that?
Well, they just announced another program as well. They're going to once again revitalize the downtown, and
the $1.6 million. Yeah.
And so I did the
how much money do we have to throw at our downtown? Do you know what I mean? Like, and let's get real here and real raw, is that for the last 10 years, I have saw so many different initiatives start. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But yet I still have the same people that were on the streets 10 years ago that are still homeless today, that are still without a house, that are still addicted, now chronically addicted to substances that were never on our streets like this, right? So, in short, is this unit going to make a difference in your opinion, Mike?
Absolutely not. And so where we really need to get to is we need to take those funds and we need to allocate that to real policing. And so that's what I've said. If you follow me on Facebook or social media, and you'll see multiple tweets and Twitters and things that I've said.
Sharing of information. From a perspective and different perspectives.
Format, you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I've said this over and over. Take the funds that you're putting into the DOT and into the Watch program and this new initiative.
Yeah.
And that is a lot of boots to the ground.
It's tons of boots. And I guess for me, I also just even considered the fact that we just hired amazing CPOs, community peace officers here in Lethbridge. And, they've just already been so instrumental downtown. Yes. I get to collaborate with them, etc. But my question and why I'm wondering is, again, relating back to the acting chief, is he had stated that, it's too much money and, it's a Band-Aid solution for more officers. When I'm thinking, holy cats, like, we just hired all these CPOs. And my understanding is that, sure, there's no firearm training or maybe domestic violence training or any of that, but how quick could these guys actually get trained to become police officers?
Correct.
There's 8 police officers right there in less than a few months, in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, let's get real. Like, we're just throwing money, we're creating all these new initiatives, and nothing's changing.
Right. And it's a great proving ground, and the officers on the street will tell you it's a great way to select new police officers.
Yeah, and I mean, they're amazing CPOs, but absolutely. I mean, let's get real, right? Like, we have too many Band-Aid solutions. You've named some, and I look at more police officers isn't a Band-Aid solution. In fact, we could use all 8 on the north side specifically.
Oh, absolutely.
But in any event, I just wanted to kind of switch topics because you have so much experience, especially with fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
How harmful it is. You've done so much education training around illegal drugs such as that. And I've heard so much different controversy, and I've spoke with so many different people, on the different viewpoints of it. But Mike, I guess my question as a professional and a retired first responder is accidental exposure to fentanyl a real thing? Can people actually be harmed if they came into contact with fentanyl?
Yeah, and I won't pretend to be the world's leading expert on
thank you for that.
matter, but I will say this, that I do have an extensive background. I taught pharmacology to paramedics for almost 7 years. I am also hazardous materials technician, CBRN trained. So I do have a background in this, and that's one of the things that early on in this fight, I came head to head with some folks at Arches, and we came to some words about fentanyl and some of the dangers. And one of my main concerns was that they were not taking this health risk with as much gravity as they should be putting to it. And, to answer your question, yes, fentanyl is an extremely dangerous substance. And I'll summarize it by just saying raw fentanyl powder is really what we're talking about. Yep. And we're talking about
scary.
First responder exposure to that.
Yeah, and even frontline workers, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, we're supporting guys that are carrying fentanyl on them, and I'm just like, we need to know what our risks are even as frontline workers.
Absolutely. So, where the confusions come into play is the difference in formats, right? So when it's pressed into a pill and it's in a therapeutic dosing range, there's very little risk for you as a frontline worker to put your hand in somebody's pocket and get accidentally exposed. But what happens if you come across the person who's actually manufacturing the pills and has a significant quantity of the raw powder on them?
And that's what we find a lot is the actual powder.
Yeah, and it's a very dangerous animal. Because all I have to do is I just got to put my finger onto a grain of salt worth of carfentanil, W18. I mean, that's the problem.
Which is also on our streets right now.
Absolutely.
Carfentanil is,
And we have analogs that we don't even know about.
Absolutely.
Because I just visited the NIOSH site today, and they're now still talking about new analogs that we don't even know if Narcan works on them anymore. We don't know really how powerful they truly are. I mean, when we were talking about carfentanil, we were talking about 1,000 times more potent than medical grade fentanyl.
And that's scary.
Yeah, but then when you go to the W18s, now you're 10,000 times more potent. So what is the next analog? How potent is it? And this is where I've been so vocal and very fearful is some of these loaded syringes that we're finding out on the street.
By daycares, let's be real. We have them on we have them by daycares, we have them in parks. Loaded needles are a real thing and an actual terrible consequence for many vulnerable children in our community, right?
Absolutely. And it's only a matter of time. I've said this over and over and over again. It may happen today, it may happen tomorrow, maybe 3 weeks from now.
Terrible thought.
But somebody is going to get pricked with a needle that has a significant amount of lethal substance in it, and we're going to have a bad day at the office. Now, having said that, this is my other concern, and this one has been shrugged off. I've taken a lot of heat for this one, and I've been called out on social media for exposing some of the videos that I've put out there. But I'm telling you right now, folks, and you're hearing this right from the horse's mouth, and that is I'm just as concerned for the worker that's being sent out there to pick up these needles and doing it inappropriately. That is the issue that I've tried to bring forward. Is we've got workers that is their job. That's what they're getting paid to do. And yet their safety is not at the forefront of their employer's mind.
Yeah. And I really, in a general way though, I don't think any of the frontline workers' safety is number one. Right? Like we are putting ourselves at risk every single day as frontline workers. We don't have lifelines. We're cleaning up discarded needles. I've never been physically trained on how to properly do it. But, again, it's just like every single day, frontline workers like myself are risking our lives being out there with the potential of accidental exposure because our guys are carrying carfentanil, they're carrying fentanyl, etc. Dirty, uncapped needles. We have them left in our vehicles. Like it's brutal. So Mike, I want to thank you for coming on. And, we've talked about so many different perspectives, so many just issues and had good, thorough conversation, despite if I agree with you and you agree with my perspective. But in any event, not a Flames fan at all. It's a Pittsburgh fan. This is the ugliest sweater ever. But in any event, Mike, I really love to end with solutions. That's, I'm all about solutions and unity. So I want to ask you is, what is your hope for our community? What is the hope for Lethbridge?
Well, I think our hope is that we can get back to the 4-pillar approach, and we really certainly got to get away from, this, putting all of our eggs in one basket, which has been feeding addiction. And I think if we can do that as a community, I think we have hope to get ourselves back on track, and hopefully we can get into recovery.
And that 4 pillars was a model and also, said to be implemented through city council. And yet we have one where I know, as a result of working with so many individuals right now facing chronic homelessness, that supportive housing piece should have been done 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. So in any event, thank you for coming on. We're going to wrap this up. Our next podcast, we're going to be hosting Janessa Fife, who's going to come on and share her experience about what her and her family have gone through after her son was pricked by a needle. Thanks for tuning in, you guys.
You've been listening to Connecting Your Community with Blaine Huygen and Mallory Christensen. Join us next time as we continue to discuss community topics and how all of us together can make a difference. Remember, there is no community without unity.